They looked like regular soldiers, laughing and joking around in perfect English, smoking cigarettes like any American GI would. But then one officer said something strange, just one odd word, and suddenly everything changed. That word was Lalapalooza. And it wasn't some secret code or password. It was a test, a trap that caught spies who thought their perfect accents would keep them safe. This is the incredible true story of how one simple word became a legend in the hidden battles of World War II. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, the Pacific Ocean turned into a terrifying place overnight. American soldiers found themselves scattered across jungle islands they'd never heard of, fighting an enemy that seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. Rumors started spreading fast through the ranks. People whispered that Japanese spies were dressing up as American troops, walking right past checkpoints, stealing secrets, and nobody could tell the difference. Some of these infiltrators had actually lived in California or Hawaii before the war started, so they spoke English perfectly, with no accent at all. They knew the words, sure, but could they really understand what it meant to be American? That question haunted every soldier standing guard in the dark. Out there in the hot, humid nights, a uniform didn't prove anything anymore because anyone could steal one. So commanders came up with a brilliant solution: use language itself as a weapon. Soldiers started creating quick verbal challenges, little trick questions based on slang, sports trivia, or jokes that only real Americans would know. Guards at checkpoints would suddenly ask things like, "Who won the World Series last year?" Or, "What's the name of Mickey Mouse's girlfriend?" The logic was simple and smart. An enemy spy could memorize vocabulary from a textbook, but they couldn't memorize growing up in America. And somewhere in all those checkpoints and challenges, one particular word became famous. Lalapalooza was old American slang that meant something amazing, something incredible, or over the top. For someone who grew up speaking English, saying it was no problem at all. But for a Japanese infiltrator trying to blend in, those tricky L and R sounds were an absolute nightmare. The legend says that one suspicious guard used this word at a Pacific checkpoint one night. He asked a group of soldiers to repeat it out loud. Most of them said it easily, without thinking twice. But one man hesitated, stumbling over the sounds. That tiny pause, that moment of uncertainty, was enough to give him away. He wasn't who he claimed to be. Now, there's no official military report that confirms this exact moment ever happened. But soldiers told this story over and over again until it became part of military folklore. The truth is, the Lalapalooza test was never really about pronunciation at all. It was about belonging, about knowing things that couldn't be taught in any classroom or textbook. While that story spread through the ranks, the real intelligence war was happening quietly behind the scenes. Japanese agents had already proven just how dangerous infiltration could be. In Hawaii, a naval intelligence officer named Takeo Yoshikawa pretended to be a diplomat, while secretly sending detailed reports about ship movements at Pearl Harbor. His information actually helped plan the devastating attack that pulled America into the war. The Allies learned their lesson fast and built massive counterintelligence programs all around the world. In Europe, they trained special linguists and cultural experts called the Ritchie Boys, Jewish refugees who had escaped Nazi Germany and could switch between languages like changing clothes. In the Pacific, Japanese-American soldiers joined something called the Military Intelligence Service, or MIS. These brave men translated captured documents, listened in on enemy radio messages, and questioned prisoners of war. The heartbreaking part? Many of them had family members locked up in internment camps back in America. Yet they still fought for a country that didn't fully trust them. They understood something no magic word test could ever reveal. They listened carefully for regional dialects, for emotional tones, for tiny hesitations in speech. They could tell if a prisoner came from Tokyo or Osaka just by how he talked, whether his military vocabulary matched his rank, whether his respectful phrases sounded genuine or rehearsed. To these translators, identity wasn't about pronouncing a word correctly. It was about truly living inside a language. Meanwhile, those checkpoint tests became part of everyday military life. Every army needed small rituals to feel a bit safer in all that chaos. A lone sentry could challenge a stranger with a random phrase, a baseball question, or a bit of slang, and feel like they had some control. These tests weren't perfect systems by any means. They were just small gestures of control in a war that felt completely out of control. By late 1944, the Allies had turned language into a serious weapon. American linguists were decoding Japanese messages that revealed exactly where enemy troops were moving, intelligence that saved thousands of American lives. Skilled interrogators extracted vital information from captured soldiers using patience and understanding instead of torture or violence. This invisible battle for information turned out to be just as important as any battlefield victory. And through it all, soldiers kept whispering about Lalapalooza. Maybe it really happened exactly that way, maybe it didn't. But the word itself became a powerful symbol of cleverness, of staying alert, of how something as tiny as a syllable could mean the difference between life and death. When the war finally ended in 1945, these stories came home with the survivors. Veterans would sit around and remember those tense nights at checkpoints, the nervous jokes, the forced laughter that covered up their fear. They remembered that sometimes victory didn't come from having bigger guns or more troops, but from thinking just a little bit faster than the enemy. For the Japanese-American translators, though, the legacy felt bittersweet. They had genuinely shortened the war by breaking enemy codes and convincing enemy soldiers to surrender. Yet many of them came home to find their families still trapped behind barbed wire in those internment camps. Eventually, their incredible work was recognized, and historians now call the MIS the silent heroes of the Pacific War. As the decades rolled by, the Lalapalooza tales slowly faded into legend, becoming a word that symbolized a much bigger truth. Wars aren't only fought with tanks and planes and battleships. They're fought with understanding, with knowledge, with the sharp ability to see through any disguise. Language can build a wall between people, or it can build a bridge. In World War II, it did both. Even today, military intelligence officers study these exact lessons from the past. They learn that speaking a language fluently doesn't mean you understand it authentically. They learn that culture, tone of voice, and gut instinct reveal what perfect grammar tries to hide. And they still tell the story of a single word that supposedly stopped a spy cold in his tracks. A word that reminded every soldier to trust their instincts above everything else. Lalapalooza. It sounds funny, it feels awkward, and it's completely unforgettable. It might never have appeared in any official military report, but it speaks to something deeply real and human. It speaks to our eternal need to separate truth from imitation, to tell friend from enemy. The Second World War was filled with massive battles that history remembers forever: Midway, Normandy, Stalingrad. But there were also countless smaller, invisible battles fought in the shadows, in secret code rooms, in whispered conversations, in that split second between asking a question and hearing an answer. Those quiet moments remind us that victory isn't always measured in captured territory or shiny medals, but in pure understanding. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the most powerful weapon on earth is a single word.